Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hello. Awesome. We've got some callers and listeners joining us. Thank you for making time tonight. Come on in. We'll get started in another minute. Awesome. Hope everyone is having a great Wednesday night. We love hosting these calls. I have a surprise for all of you listeners here in just a moment about this webinar that we do every month and have done for nearly 5 years now. I hope everyone is getting settled. We're going to start in just another couple seconds. Awesome. Okay, folks, hello. Welcome to XYPN's webinar. I am Maddie Roach. I'm XYPN's Director of Member Services. Many of you who have attended these webinars before know who I am and what the experience is like on one of these calls. These are some of the best calls that XYPN can offer to our non-members as an opportunity for all of you to learn a little bit more about this space, get comfortable with the idea of potentially starting your own firm, joining one, or even some of you may have firms already. Tonight's topic is particularly important to all of us here at XYPN and really to any entrepreneur. We're going to be talking about finding that sweet spot and making sure that we are charging a fee that is fair to both our clients and to ourselves. This is a topic of conversation I've joked for years is kind of ever evolving. You're never going to talk to a financial advisor in this space that is not probably thinking about their fees at some point and have at least during that week. We're going to talk to two members tonight who have been with us for nearly 2 years about their experiences starting their firms and then finding that sweet spot. So I hope you all are very excited. We have received a whole bunch of questions ahead of time. And this particular webinar really kind of warranted some substantive questions, meaning there was a lot of detail to the questions, examples, scenarios. Some of you were really open about what you were asking these members. So we're going to get to those questions today, but I invite all of our listeners to drop in questions into the Q&A section because I will be pulling questions from there. Really, I want to give credit to both Daniel and Isaiah tonight that these folks are volunteering to be part of our movement and to share their experience. And that's the theme at XYPN, is that you're going to find a lot of advisors really being transparent about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And tonight's a really good example of kind of that culture that we have here. So if either Isaiah or Daniel motivated you to end up joining XYPN, maybe some of you are on the fence, please let us know in the application. When you applied for XYPN membership, we do always ask, was there someone that encouraged you to join? If it was Daniel and Isaiah or one or the other, please list them. We'd like to thank them and they'll get a little something on the other end. So please let us know if this webinar is effective for you and if whether one of these two wonderful members motivated you to join. Of course, I do want to give a shout out to our next month webinar, which is equally as wonderful. It's finding almost the sweet spot of the business, but it's a fork in the road. It's choosing to build a lifestyle practice or an enterprise firm. That's really another juncture we find a lot of our members finding themselves at is, do we build a small firm or a big firm? We are changing the time of next month's webinar. It is no longer a nightly call, folks. So your kids will be happy. I will be happy. We all will be happy. We're going to test it out. And if it doesn't work, we're coming right back to this time. But it's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, so 11 a.m. Mountain. And it's going to be the first Wednesday of the month, per usual. So be sure to register for that. Okay, with that, let's get talking about fees. Any of you listeners who have been on here before, you know that we like to pack it full of content. So I won't slow down. These two are ready and excited to share their experiences. So Daniel, I will let you do the honors of introducing yourself and your firm.
Sure. My name is Dan Tobias. I came to this industry in 2011, graduated college sometime before then, and decided I didn't like any of the jobs before me. I needed a goal to travel the world, saved up my money, took off, spent 2 years traveling with my wife. Came back, said, what do I know how to do now? I'd been a business consultant. Turns out I know how to retire. That's strange. in your 20s. And that's what my dad did in Florida. So I went and joined his firm with the intention of not staying in Florida because, no offense to any fellow Floridians on the call, I didn't want to end back up there. And eventually made my way to North Carolina. Didn't find the right firm for me, and ultimately found I needed to go out on my own. And when it was time for that, that was an easy decision in calling XY.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that background.
Yep.
Isaiah, tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm.
Yeah, so I started the industry in 2015, worked at Merrill Lynch on a team for about 3.5 years. Just through that experience, was treated very fairly, which is not always the case. I saw a lot of peers that maybe weren't, but I got to the point where I didn't feel like that was the right place for me if I was sitting across the table from someone to say, hey, you should come work with us. This is why you work with us. And from there, I started looking out into the world, like, what are my options? Looked at some other fee-only firms in the Indianapolis area, which is where I live. And there were some great opportunities and some good places. And for me, ultimately, I wanted to build something that made sense for me, and that I wasn't having to buy someone else's firm or kind of adapt to what I wanted to do. So with that, launched in August 1st of 2018 was when I launched. So there's that.
Awesome. Thank you. It could be a call in and of itself of the decision to start the firm, but we're going to have to just avoid that question. Daniel, tell us about your firm in terms of how big is it? Who are you serving? How many clients? And then we'll talk fees.
Sure. So I set my firm with the goal of serving people who wanted to dream big and do something similar, like traveling the world or retiring early. And I like to say not retiring to the golf course in Florida at age 65. So I am attracting a lot of those people, but because of my background, just with that prior firm in Fort Lauderdale, which is my father's firm, much more traditional RIA fee only, and also the one I was with in North Carolina previously, I have people, clients in their early 30s who have their first baby on their hip. I actually had 6 client babies in the last 6 months.
Wow.
All the way up to a few 80-year-old widows. So, and everything in between. So I haven't done so great at sticking to the niche, but up to about 24 clients and 22 million of assets under management.
Right on track. Nice job, Daniel. Cool. Love it.
Thank you.
Isaiah, give yourself some credit. Tell us about ID Financial Planning and Wealth Management.
Yeah, so ID Financial Planning and Wealth Management is, again, I had a niche focus prior to XY, so I know if you've heard XY stuff, you always hear niche. My focus was within dentistry, and then within that and centers of influence was also looking at working with veterinarians. So it's serving dentists and veterinarians, kind of 3 different life stages that they go through. That new grad associates are working for someone else, typical, small business owners, they transition to ownership. And then maybe the more traditional financial planning client that's thinking about retirement, transitioning out of the business. So those are really the people that I serve. About 50% of the business today is within that niche. And I have 18 clients, and I don't really think that AUM is how I focus, but I have about 4 million in AUM from that standpoint, but that's not, we'll talk about fees. That's not really how I charge. It's not really the way that I measure the business, but for what it's worth, that's the AUM.
Oh, so much to dig into. Thank you, Isaiah. Daniel, back to you. Let's talk about the evolution of your fees. Walk the listeners through where you started and where you're at now, and we can talk about inflection points after that.
Sure. So I'd say 2 inflection points, one in the last month, and one maybe in my second month. So started off and sort of said, okay, I've only seen this done one way before. That's a tiered 1% AUM structure, build in advance, so on and so forth. Set out to do it, looked at the XY membership stuff and saw, okay, I need to be fee only. Okay, I need to be a CFP. I need to join NAPFA, and this sort of list you need to tick off to be a member of XY. And all of it was great, except for one. It was having that retainer structure, which was different than how I had done it before. So I set up to have 2 different retainer options. One $200 a month or $2,400 a year. The other $300 a month or $3,600 a year. And I made some differences in terms of what those represented, but I think my first error was that those differences revolved around client choice, and that a client would choose to be in the lower or the higher level. So naturally, everybody chose the lower level, regardless of what their actual needs were. And I wasn't very good about sticking to that script of work. So I've got a few mismatches there, but it took a long time to deal with that. And that's actually what I dealt with in the most recent month as I updated my ADV this cycle. But initially, the first thing I changed was, I'd only ever seen fees billed one way. That was in advance. And after doing the very first cycle, I realized everything I hated about fee billing I could do away with if I switched to arrears, which was sort of my first realization that, oh, I'm really running this business the way I want to run it. And that meant I didn't have to do pro rata billing, when a client comes on, or worry about refunds if I lose a client, so on and so forth. So I made that change right away. And in addition to that retainer, I also was charging 75 or 80 bips for the assets under management, thinking, and again, what I was targeting, I was still in that old school way of thought of targeting the proverbial $1 million client, paying me the proverbial 1%. So at 75 bips plus 2,400 bucks, that was pretty close. That was how I did my math at the start. And that was a good way to get started, but it has changed since. Do you want me to go into that now, Maddie, or hold on?
Let's jump over to Isaiah in just a minute.
Yeah.
I think there's so much that you just mentioned that we can come back to. And I do want to clarify just something Daniel mentioned. We do not require the CFP for membership. And we do not require NAPFA or I just wanted to clarify those two. But thank you, Daniel, and I can't wait to hear where you stand today. Isaiah, what's been your evolution of your fees? Did you start somewhere else where you are now than where you are now?
So I've had my fees have been the same since I started from that standpoint. So that's either smart or stupid, depending on who you ask and how you want to look at it. But really, the inspiration for me, so I charge a net worth fee, and we can talk about that more in the future as well. But I interviewed at a firm, again, I talked about working at Merrill Lynch. I interviewed with a firm as well that was a fee-only, larger RA in Indy at the same time back in 2014, 2015. That had a net worth fee that I really liked their approach and the philosophy. So I really adapted a lot of what they were doing and brought it down to not having to work with like higher end type of clients. And so for me, I have a net worth fee that is on my website. So I think it's really important, to have the transparency to say this is what the fee is. I have a minimum fee of $150 a month, $300 up front for each client, and then it tiers up depending on the net worth from there. So that's the way that I structure that. And again, for me, working with business owners, a lot of times, and again, we can talk more about that. If you want to charge and do traditional AUM and you work with business owners, that doesn't always work. And I think that's something, if you're thinking about targeting that niche and charging AUM, you're going to run into struggles. And I've had a number of conversations with XY members around that have switched. So that was kind of the genesis for why net worth, because I wanted people to invest in their businesses and do what was best for them. So that's why.
Awesome. Listeners, if you've got follow-up questions to that, we're getting into a lot. So please do just drop the questions in and I'll try to ask them as efficiently as possible. Daniel, a caller, did ask a question I had, which is, what was the difference that changed between billing in arrears and in advance?
So specifically with going in advance, so theoretically when someone comes on board, let's say they come on in the first month of the quarter, I need to either bill them a pro rata for the remainder of the quarter, or that at the end of the quarter, bill them a big chunk. And I didn't like that. And specifically, I didn't like doing the extra work around that to potentially piss someone off. And likewise, I haven't lost any clients yet, but doing a pro rata refund. So it hurts a little bit on cash flow because it takes longer. Like if I onboard a client at the end of the quarter, they're going to really pay me next to nothing at the end of the quarter. And I got to sort of wait 3 months for that revenue, which is stinky, but I view that as short-term pain for avoidance of work that I don't want to do for the rest of my career.
Yeah, awesome. I really appreciated your perspective about, you were kind of just in one way of thinking about fees when you came into here, into the space of running your own firm, and that it was actually a privilege of being an entrepreneur that you got to change it up. So tell us how you changed up your fees.
Yeah, so actually, I drank a lot of Kool-Aid from different wells, and some of that happened to be probably Isaiah's in sort of that net worth idea and specifically complexity. And, one of my first clients who, it was really my first real client. And so I cut a little bit of a discount as a thank you because they knew it. And I sort of waived that retainer and we just billed on the AUM. So 75 bips was pretty good. And this has got to be the most complex client in my career. They're dual citizens. They want to live abroad. He's a business owner. And there was all kinds of really big tax issues from the accountant with structures in the business and how his personal pension was done and this and that and that and this. And he's sort of become my perfect example. And he's a great client, and I talk to him all the time. And he's referred me other business, but it's sort of become an example of, okay, there's a better way. And so what I've done now is I've actually reduced that AUM fee. It's now 50 bips instead of 75 or 80.
Wow.
And it was 75, and after a few months, I changed it to 80. That was just sort of a minor change.
Yeah.
It was easier to just do mental math with 80. That was the logic. And so I've reduced it to 50 bips. And now instead I have a complexity-based fee that ties in things like, do they own a business? What is the net worth? Are there complex estate planning concerns? Is this a single person, be it a widower or someone who doesn't yet have kids, or someone married with children, 529s, estate, in the whole 9 yards. And that planning looks very different in terms of workload for me. And I had a lot of clients or prospective clients calling up and sort of questioning, the old, hey, if I've got $1 million and my neighbor's got $2 million, why should they pay twice as much as me, or vice versa? And I agreed with them. And so this is a better way for me to articulate, okay, look, yeah, there's a certain element of this connected to the AUM. If the assets are there, if they're not there, that's fine. I can still work with you. But we're gonna actually work out a fee that sort of matches what my workload is to your needs.
Totally. So to that point, Isaiah, how do you handle the complexity issues? What if you've got a complex person and they're paying way less than the other person, or, yeah.
And we talked prior to launch, and I've had some conversations with other members within XY around partnerships or different things. And I had someone that kind of pushed back on the structure of the net worth fee. And, well, what about this situation? What about this situation? No matter what fee structure you decide, regardless, there will always be a case scenario where there's going to be something that doesn't make sense, and you're going to have to say, you know what, maybe we have to tweak something here or make it fair. Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to have conviction in what you're doing for a client and saying, what I'm charging you is fair, and have that conversation and be open and frank. And people appreciate that. If you tell someone, hey, this is how I structure things, but they have a ton of real estate that I know nothing about, let's say, and I'm not helping them and they're the expert, it would not make a lot of sense or any sense to charge on net worth for that. If I'm not doing so there's certain situations, I've not ran into that. I don't really attract those people at this point, but there can be times, and there could be times where that could be something that would come up. But yeah, for me, there are typically, the way that I look at it, typically with net worth, as that grows, there's going to be typically more complexity and things that they're going to need around in their life. So that's, again, part of why I wanted to do it. I also came from the AUM world, similar. I just worked for someone that it was always like that asset gathering meeting of, hey, these held away assets, let's make sure we get them to roll them over, And I didn't like that personally. I despised always having that pitch at the end of the meeting, hey, by the way, you should roll over that extra whatever. So with net worth, I wanted to be able to talk to people and say, if you have $1, what's the best use of the funds? I don't care if we're paying down debt, talking about student loans, reinvesting in your business. For me, that's where the net worth thing made more sense. And then being niche specific helps with having a lot of that conversation. So that, for me, I guess, tries to answer the complexity question. But yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, well said. Daniel, I'm interested in those initial numbers of the subscription model. How did you get there? Did you work backwards from an hourly rate that you wanted to make, or what made you land at the 200 to 300 range?
Really, it was okay if the proverbial millionaire should be paying me 1%, if that's sort of, it was actually something Alan, I don't know if Alan Moore said or wrote, the market sets the rate, the advisor sets the algorithm. And that was something that really stuck with me. And okay, so market rate seems to be this 1% figure, and there's all these kinds of things wrong with it, like being able to serve people with less than $1 million as an example, right? But if that's the market rate, well, okay, why do I need to really think that hard about what the market rate is? I'll play in that sandbox. And so if $10,000 is the fee, then for someone with $1 million, I'm just going to change the algorithm around. And so that was it, 75 bips plus 2,400. That was the logic. And I didn't put a whole lot of deep thought into it. I sort of, again, something else that was written and said multiple times is you can change this stuff. I think it was Alan, he said, you can change everything, just some things are more painful to change than others. I haven't gone back and changed my fee with clients, but I've certainly changed it going forward. I've done the easier thing. The harder thing might come later, right? But yeah, no, not a whole lot went into tying it to my hours and things like that. And that's really one of the big reasons why I've since changed it, because I did have some relatively complex clients paying me $2,400 with no assets. And that really didn't match up with the time I was putting in.
Yeah, totally appreciate that perspective. Isaiah, going back to this net worth conversation, did you run scenarios to ensure that you were making enough or reaching the hourly goal that you wanted, given like 10 client scenario, possible scenarios or something? Did you use that as a hook?
I mean, I tried to think of, okay, if I only got at the lowest tier, like what would that look like? How many clients could I take on? One of the things, and Kitsis has talked about this a number of times, is kind of charging a percentage of income. And so for me, where that 150 originally came from was, if I looked at, so between dentists and veterinarians typically make less, and about 2% of the starting wage for a veterinarian would be about 150 a month. So that's kind of where that 150 came originally. And I looked at other XYPN advisors and where they started. Some I think started too low. 150 I still think is very fair, and probably will go up over time and will change at some point. It hasn't yet for me. But that was really how I decided on that initially, was looking at that. And I mean, I have clients that are certainly not paying that as well, that are, non-niche, older, more traditional planning or AUM specific clients where they would have investable assets that have a net worth that it is significantly higher, that it still makes sense for them, but they pay more than that 150. So for me, at this point, it's really a barbell of younger clients and then some older clients that weigh that out, and there's just different needs depending on where they're at in life as far as the planning and time spent with them.
And same question for you, Isaiah, again, not same question, but can't clients under-report what their net worth is?
Yeah, they could. So when I go through data gathering, and that's one thing for me, I mean, if they're going to lie to me like that, it's probably not going to be a long relationship.
Yeah, that's...
My personality is, if I found out like they withheld something or lied, I'd fire them. Like, I'm not going to beg someone. I'm not going to work with people I don't like. Even starting up, like, it's easy because everyone's like, hey, you got to get clients. I can find clients. I'll get clients. I'm not worried about that aspect of it. And if someone's going to be misleading me, I think that relationship, it's broken, that move on, just get rid of them. They're not worth it.
Totally.
So.
Daniel, I'm pulling from a question. I won't read it verbatim, but a question that was submitted. Interestingly, it's very similar to the story that you had, that he or she inherited the AUM model from a former partner, and they want to move to a flat fee or a retainer setup. They are scared of having a conversation about fee changes. So talk to us about how you have handled on raising fees for new clients, but also when you have the inevitable conversation about fee increases, how will you handle it?
Yeah, so I haven't had that conversation with existing clients yet. For new clients, it's easier because I just present the new fee and explain the reasons behind it. And as it continues to evolve, it becomes easier for me to speak to, because I've created it, right? I haven't just inherited the AUM. As for changing it, I have two clients in particular who are really sort of on my radar. One I really like, one not so much, and I'd be okay seeing them go. But the one I really like is a super complex client. Their assets under management with me is zero. They're just financial planning. They are my one client that chose to pay me that $3,600 instead of $2,400. Their income now is probably, to give you an idea, is in the upper six figures, and their net worth is between 1 and 2 million, and it's very complex, and dual citizen status, and I'm doing their taxes, and there's no question that they're getting exceptional value. And my conversation, and they know that, because they are sort of in this industry as well. They're not advisors, but they're sort of in the finance industry. So that conversation, they're the ones who have sort of thought the most about on this, and it's basically like, look, I've definitely underpriced myself with respect to what I've done with you guys. I think you see the value. with my new structure, your fee should be X. I'm not comfortable just laying that out for you. We'll make it Y, a little bit lower, and set it up, in a few months. So think about it. Let me know. Let me know if you've got any questions. Here are the reasons for it. Here's what comes into play. So in their instance, it is the income, it's the net worth, it's all of it, because it all ties in. Let me know if you've got any questions. I'm not pushing this on you now to force you and say, okay, you've got to agree to this today. This isn't a hard sell. But this is nonetheless where I'm going, and hopefully you guys will stick around. But I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Well, be sure to ask some follow-up questions, listeners. Isaiah, for you, specifically to business owners, how do you determine a client's net worth when it can be really hard to value the business?
Yeah, so one of the things that I did, knowing, again, for business owners, so if they're a dentist or veterinarian, I went to CPAs that do valuation work and kind of asked them, hey, a good rule of thumb that would be on the low side, because again, I always explain that I want to make sure that I'm not, charging a premium for what it would be in the market just so my fee's extra high. No, this would be something that would be much lower. So again, I won't necessarily get into the details of that, but that's the way that I've done it, where I'd say, hey, I'm going to make sure that the valuation of their business is lower than what actually the market rate would determine. But that's how I've done it, is I went out and asked a CPA that locally does a lot of valuation work, and then another one that helps a number of different young doctors buy into practices. So she kind of does that too, to kind of help with where that's at. So that's how I did it.
Very cool. We had the caller ask you, Daniel, does Daniel charge a separate fee for tax preparation or factor that into the complexity fee?
Yeah, that's a good one. So initially the choice point, previously when I was 24 or 3,600, the big difference between the two in terms of choice was tax prep and planning with the higher level. The logic being at that lower level, I'm not going to think about things like Roth conversions. Yeah, I'll be tax efficient with investments and we'll make use of IRAs, but doing calculations around retirement plans for a small business owner, Roth conversions for retiree, or actual tax prep not included. And for $1,200, okay, we can work all that in and fit that. Under the new structure, it is included just across the board, provided we're not talking about business returns. So for the typical simple return, 1040 schedules A, B, C, or sorry, not C, D, etc. It's basically just included under the fee, and depending on the situation, yeah, maybe I'll just eat the Schedule C prep as well if it's sort of an easy thing, and if not, well, okay, we'll work with the CPA they're already working with, or we'll massage it appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I hope that answers the caller's questions. To either of you, whoever would like to start, would it ever make sense to charge a fee based on percentage of a client's income? Isaiah, I think you talked briefly about that.
Sure.
Wondering if people are struggling managing debt, wealth, aren't able to afford financial planning to begin with.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I've tried to work all of this into my little complexity calculator. So for example, initially when I made this calculator, I sort of had a percent of income as part of the fee. So some of the stuff I've seen out there in the marketplace is 1% of income plus some much smaller tiered amount of basis points on AUM, and basically that starts to move towards net worth as well, and basically taking it all in. And again, it's up to us to set the algorithm, but the market's going to set the rate. Ultimately, we're going to come out to about the same place. I've stepped away from that personally, and instead set just a couple of tiered fixed prices. So basically for sort of that base fee, and none of this is outward. This is a little bit less than transparent. Unfortunately, it's a little too much into the sausage making. But for the base fee, if someone makes $180,000, so on and so forth, has some credit card debt or some student debt, it's sort of all in. But above $200,000 of income, or above $100,000 of non-collateralized debt, where those things start to materially impact planning, then I might add on a $200 or a $400 annual fee. If income goes much, I think the next tier on my income was maybe $600,000. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. Another tier of dollars. Same thing with the debt. Same thing with held away net worth. And then, again, another pocket for having a business and things like that. And the logic there is, to get to the question, Maddie, of, okay, well, what if a person's got too much debt or not enough income? There's all these different things, is that hopefully by sort of making it into this piecemeal thing, I've got a fee that is appropriate, again, for the work that I'm doing for them, that matches up, that is palatable to them and affordable.
Great. Isaiah, comments?
I was just gonna say, I know when Kits has talked about it, if you think about income, he said it basically anything over 2.5% of income is gonna be too high. So that's just one of those things that I would think about there. So, somewhere between 1% and 2% from there made sense. If that's the approach that you want to take, that's maybe a rule of thumb. But again, you got to pick a fee that makes sense for you and the clients that you serve. They have to be able to afford it to make sure that you can stay in business to take care of them. So, I mean, that's important too. You have to make sure you have obligations to take care of, and you can do that. But I think you can absolutely do the income piece.
Yeah. Interesting question posed by a caller that, we talked about this kind of on the surface, but if you were to take your average client and divide it by the hours that you spend, would it result in the hourly fee that you'd want? Daniel?
No, but that's no question, no. And that's a function of, I'm still growing and shelling out big money for, processes and software and this and that. And I have not yet replaced my old take-home pay. It was, in the lower six figures, and so that's not quite up there yet. But at this point, I'm paying myself. That's big, big improvement. But it's a marathon, not a sprint, just like investing. So the answer is an emphatic no. But hopefully, at some point in the not too distant future, yes.
You got it. Awesome. Thanks for that, and I appreciate your transparency. Isaiah, how about you?
I would totally agree with Daniel. Like, there's no way. But no way. I tell everyone that I talk to, like, hey, how's business? How's different things going? I love what I do. I would not change it for the world, knowing what I know now. But I've worked harder and made so little for what I've done. It's not there yet. But again, it is a long time. I'm still young. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not looking to retire. I enjoy what I do and plan to live a long time and be able to do this. So no, I'm excited about that opportunity and what I see out there. And for most people on this call, they know that the bar in the industry is so low that there's such a good opportunity for people to take care of someone the right way and charge them appropriately and actually care and do well by them. You'll be successful. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. I know, like the XYPN benchmarking studies, a lot of times it's like that year 3 is really where you start to see the hockey stick growth. And so for me, it's like stay in the game and, you're there. But last thing on that. So for those that he's not an XY member, Doug Bonaparte, I don't know if anyone knows that name. He's on Twitter, he's on CNBC, all these different, he talks about early on, especially for an advisor, it's assets under management versus assets. And so that's something that always has kind of stuck with me. So you need the experience, you need the people to work with, you need those relationships. Because let's say you say, you know what, I'm going to charge X, but you have no clients. That's great. You have no business. You can charge too little and then have that struggle too, but you need to have, especially if you're newer to the industry or changing, you need to have people to work with to get the experience to then be able to grow into that. So again, that's not my original quote. I just like it. It's something that stuck with me for a while. So
yeah. Interesting that you talk about using kind of those first few clients as test runs. I see that over and over and over again. In fact, I just interviewed someone for XYPN Radio today, and he talked a lot about how those first clients helped him decide what the service model was. They helped them, him decide what to charge, what his value was. And I think that if you can make it fun and, want to be playing the game tomorrow, you can certainly use some transparency, again, the theme in talking to your clients about what's fair. What do you see as the value? And for you, Isaiah, I think that recommendation to our listeners is a really good one, that this is a long-term play and things are going to change. I mean, if anything changes, it's niches and it's fees. I see it all the time. It is an interesting question, but it's talking about how you actually bill. How do you collect your money, Daniel?
Yeah, so again, most of my clients, I only have 2 clients that have 0 assets with me.
Okay.
The rest have some level of AUM, even if it's just a few $1,000s. So for most of those, I've got TD Ameritrade accounts. I use Orion as my portfolio management. I generate my bill through them and upload it to TD. Even for those clients that only have a couple of $1,000s with me, I set up effectively an empty account, and we set up an automated ACH for, say, the $200 or $300 a month, and then I just debit that account in line with the rest of my fees at the end of the quarter through TD system. For the 2 clients that I don't have any AUM, for those guys I use AdvicePay, and I just have to say that is a wonderful part of being an XYPN member, is getting technology like that otherwise there's no way in hell I would have paid the $50 a month for, or whatever it is. Is that right, Maddie? It's 50. And I would have come up with some cockamamie workaround that would have just driven me crazy for these 2 clients. And it's just nice to be able, oh, great, I've got a solution for that done.
Yeah. Never fun to get kicked out of QuickBooks for being a financial advisor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Isaiah, how do you bill?
Yeah, so I have 2 clients that like the traditional take it out of my accounts that have significant assets. I do actually, even though I'm not an AUM type firm, I do manage all client assets up to this point. I give them the option if they want to self-direct. No one's decided to do that up to this point. But 15 of the 18 I use AdvicePay for, and then there's 3 that I bill from accounts at TD. So I mainly use AdvicePay from that standpoint.
Have you ever used the fee calculator in AdvicePay that's included?
No, I have not.
Dan?
I used it as a tool to develop my little calculator spreadsheet. It was very helpful and that was a big operation. AdvicePay was sort of, that calculator was sort of one big input. I used a couple of things. There were a couple of others. I put some initial stuff together in my spreadsheet, sent it out to a few people. They put a few ideas in my head. But yeah, that AdvicePay calculator was very, very useful. And just, I used ultimately probably none of the dollar amounts and suggestions, if they're even that, in there. But it was really useful. Just think about it and organize my thoughts.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. So listeners, AdvicePay does have a fee calculator that helps you take into some considerations into some things. So I appreciate this question because I hear this a lot, that we're scared of billing the client too frequently and them seeing our fees be deducted all the time, whether they be a monthly subscription fee or even AUM. The automatic AUM kind of gets this reputation for just, it doesn't hurt as badly as seeing the $200 leave your checking account. How do you handle that, Isaiah? What do you think?
It's upfront. It's an annual fee billed monthly. So it's not a monthly fee, it's an annual fee, and I just bill it monthly. It's easier for cash flow for you because cash flow for me is a spot for most clients that we start there. Like that, I always start there, but for most people, that's really where we want to have the conversation early on and the biggest value. And so I'm going to talk about cash flow and say, hey, this is going to come out. This is part of what you're doing, but it's an annual fee. And then from there, I've not had people yet, and again, I should probably knock on wood, I've not had an issue with someone saying, hey, you're charging me for working together. Like, they should know that they're paying you. How many times have we heard people, oh, I don't pay this person? No, you do. It's coming out somewhere. They're not working for free, I promise you.
That's a very good point. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I something Isaiah said I want to jump on. It's an annual fee billed monthly. Mine's an annual fee billed quarterly. For some of those people, they've got monthly ACHs. I started off when I set that $2,400 or $3,600 a year. I was really thinking in monthly terms and talked about it that way. And I've changed it for a couple of reasons, but mainly one of the big reasons for my rework was compliance and regulation. I mean, one of the handful of states that really don't like this retainer method, I'll just call it that. They've got 6 different words now in Raleigh, but they really don't like it. And so by just switching the language to it's an annual fee billed at whatever interval, that actually really helps. It helps with the client and it helps with regulation. So I think that's really important, and that helps make it less scary for clients.
It's a great point too, knowing what states language, like I know Colorado, I know different friends in different states that talk about different things. Indiana's never given me any issues and has been easy to work with, but yeah, that's very true. Good point.
Yeah, and anyone who's curious, I'm in North Carolina. I hear Washington State's a troubled one as well. And I think there's 2 others. Maddie, maybe you know them, I don't know.
Yep, they vary by state, and then they vary by regulator, quite frankly, and they vary year to year. and advisor to advisor. So it's very hard to get a real consensus of where we stand. But that's part of the benefit of the community, is that we can kind of be an incubator for testing out who's gotten an audit, who's gotten pushback, things like that, and share feedback that way. Question about ethics on billing in terms of net worth and income. No other profession charges fees this way, i.e. an EMT or a doctor or nurse doesn't take 50% of your net worth when they perform the Heimlich maneuver to save your life. Daniel?
Sure. That's a great point. But my work for a given client is more complex if they make $500,000 a year than if they make $120,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's just the way the tax system is.
Interesting. Isaiah?
First and foremost, anytime I've walked into a healthcare provider, they've never put their fees up and told me what I pay. And yeah, I've never understood it. I do. So first and foremost, my fees are up there so you can see it. So I think it's really important to be transparent. And so I think that should be something that should change. But notwithstanding, at the end of the day, people have to derive an income for the value that they bring. And again, Daniel's talked about like market rates. I'm probably priced slightly below the market rates, but I also think there's reasons for that, because Indiana is a cheaper place to live and there's some location arbitrage and some good things selfishly that I'm able to do, or maybe I don't have to charge the same amount as someone in California or New York, but still I need to charge something to make sure that in the future, if I want to grow my business, I can hire people, I can pay them a living wage, be a great place to work. All those things need to happen. So I also need to stay in business. I have to charge something that makes sense. And I think for the most part, anyone with an XY is charging them as extremely fair. And a lot of advisors, even if they aren't an XY and they charge AUM, which I don't necessarily agree with, a lot of times I know some people that charge AUM that do fantastic work, and they might charge $20,000 a year, but they're doing incredible work that is just super advanced for what they do. So at the end of the day, it's what value you'll be able to bring. And for me, I try to create something that's like, what have we done this year? What's the value? How can you quantify that? And yeah, I want to make sure that you're bringing something to those clients. So I think it's a great question though. Yeah, it's a very fair question. I know a lot of people push back on that stuff.
You mentioned fee arbitrage. I'm interested. Have you ever felt compelled to be pricing yourself against other advisors based on either your location or niche or anything like that?
I think at some point, I mean, I do want to be able to grow outside the state. Right now, most of the client base is within Indiana, but no, I absolutely view where I'm located as an advantage, 100%. And I think that will continue to be that way in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even more so.
Daniel, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I at least one of my clients is in New York City, and I know I'm a lot cheaper than their prior advisor was. That I don't think is the whole reason they went with me, but it made it easier for sure. But on the flip side, there's other advisors that I look at and sort of use them as sort of a data point when I'm thinking about my calculator and how much I'm going to charge. And I don't think I'm at a point where it's arbitrage, but I'm at a point where I'm aware. That I think I am a below market rate. I'm okay with that. I don't know that I will be that forever. But I might be if things stay lean and I can continue, if the firm stays lean and I can continue to sort of write and gradually pay myself more and things like that. Very well may stay that way. But yeah, no, I don't think of it as arbitrage, but general awareness.
Yeah. I don't know if most, but I would say most of XYPN members charge an upfront fee of somewhere, in the range of a couple $1,000s or a couple hundred, attached with a monthly recurring fee of a few $100s. If a client is looking for a financial plan, how are they supposed to feel like they can afford this? That is the $1 million question, my friends. How do we get people to understand that there's value long-term? Daniel?
Yeah, so I don't charge the upfront fee, and the reason is I don't like getting charged upfront fees for ongoing relationships. I don't think it's wrong to charge it. I think it's actually right, because there's so much work that goes in at the front of the relationship, right? I just don't like them myself, so that's why I've decided not to do it. And what I explain to clients is look, the fee is the fee. This is the start of what I hope is a 2 decades long relationship. There will be some years where you'll use me a lot, some years where you won't use me very much at all. And for some people, yeah, paying that fee is too much. And in some cases, it's like, all right, look, you need to do X, Y, and Z. They're really simple, but they're just going to take time. You don't need to pay me in the interim. Call me in a couple of years. So I've had quite a few of those, which maybe gets that caller question. But yeah, for me, it's just, okay, this is the long game. This is what we're looking at. And by extension, and maybe we'll get to this because I've seen some of the questions on here, I also don't do one-time plans for some of the same reason. This is a relationship. That monitoring component from the CFP exam, I think, is really important. I've seen really bad mistakes made by people who took their plan, went off, implemented it on their own, came back and hadn't actually implemented anything. So yeah, I believe very much in this is the steady state and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Isaiah, you charge an upfront fee, not.
It's small. It's not.
Yeah,
it's $300. So it's not, for me. It's more of just it's the BS. Like, are they actually serious? Are they going to get me this stuff? Are they going to move forward? So that's kind of why that's there, candidly, for me. But I totally agree. I didn't want to be the $1,200 or $2,000 to stop someone from working with me. And I always say I have to earn my keep. Again, I bill in arrears. They can fire me at any point if they want after that. Again, I say I have to earn my keep, just like, any other relationship. And if you wake up or, see a point in time where I'm not there and I'm not doing what I need to be doing, then let me know and we can make sure. I don't want to have clients that aren't valuing the service or locked in. Dealing with a technology provider right now, and it's like, hey, you have to stay for X amount more months. Like, well, I don't want to stay. And that makes a bad relationship. They're going to go tell 5 other people that you locked them in for another 6 months or something, right? So I didn't ever want to have that feeling with someone. I wanted them, if they don't like it, they're able to get out. And there was one other thing I was going to say too. I can't remember. It's spaced, but yeah, I completely agree with Daniel's take on that.
Yeah, and I'll jump on something you said, Isaiah. I think the best sales tactic on me when I'm buying and shopping is no contracts. Because Isaiah, exactly what you just said, I can be fired at any time. I've got to earn my keep. And that is something I say in literally every single discovery meeting if it didn't already come up on the initial phone call. How can we trust you? What if we don't like you? It's like, you can fire me anytime. I'm billing arrears. It's just, you call TD, move your accounts, you're done. No harm, no foul.
Have any of you had renewal meetings with your clients? And if so, does it ever make them feel like they're kind of in maintenance mode now, where there was a lot of upfront value, maybe not so much now? What's that been like, Isaiah?
That's what I was remembering, and this kind of ties in. So back to like the value of advice is lumpy. Like if someone knows exactly how their life is going to go, then maybe they can decide, hey, for 2 years, I don't need an advisor. Next 2 or 3 years, I will. Sadly, we don't have that foresight. So for me with net worth, and I don't think I talked about this earlier, so every 2 years I revisit what their net worth is. Again, my goal, let's grow it so I can incrementally raise my fee. Again, it's not going to be a huge increase. That's unless there was some, big change in their life. But for me, that's the way that I can keep up with increasing costs and other things. That way I can bring people on the team. But yeah, so I'm just starting to get around to that, coming up on, I've not been around for 2 years yet, but I will be coming up on that at in the fall with a couple different clients of having those conversations as far as coming back and saying, hey, this is where we're at. The relationship is ongoing, like I said, from that standpoint, but yeah, it's thought.
Yeah. Daniel, thoughts?
Yeah. So, I shared before how I switched from advanced to arrears in part so I wouldn't have to do work I didn't want to do. And I'm going to just call that strategic laziness. And that's to some degree how I feel about the idea of a renewal meeting. It's why, even though I've gone to this complexity-based fee, because I think it's fair, I've still kept part of the AUM around. And that's the beauty of the AUM model, is that it adjusts over time. Naturally, you don't have to have this renewal concept meeting. So that's why I've sort of split the baby, because I like that. I don't like having this conversation. I don't like having the renewal meeting. And the bottom line is, to not exactly answer the question, I don't really intend to have them. Now, with respect to maintenance, I'm going to have review meetings, and hopefully they're still feeling that they're getting value, but not the renewal meeting.
Yeah. How do you both afford your lifestyle and your business if you are not earning enough to pay for it? Isaiah?
So my wife works. She's wonderful. Within 6 months of being married, I told her I was going to quit the job I was making, just going to start making good money. So she's a teacher, so it's not like we're, making all kinds of money and living large. But candidly, so I took money I'd saved in my Roth to start the business and lived on savings. And this year, my big commitment to my wife was paying myself consistently. So that's been a big goal from this standpoint, not slowly working into it with growth and other things. But again, I'm young. I've reinvested, and I kept saying, hey, I'll pay myself another month. Like, let me just take this money and put it right back in the business. So we have a 7-month-old. So yeah, things are changing now where I have to start paying myself a little bit and different things. But yeah, absolutely. It's not something that's easy, and it's something you really need to go into with eyes wide open as far as having the appropriate savings and making sure that you're stable enough to take care of the clients that you bring on, because those people are trusting you early on that you're going to be around and be in existence. So you have to personally make sure you have your plan in place to know what's going on. But yeah.
Daniel?
Yeah, savings is a big part of that. So I've got 3 small children, twins that are 6 and my third is 4. And my wife is also a solo entrepreneur. She runs a small marketing firm and works part-time. So between the two of us, with me doing this, we've got no dedicated healthcare and no dedicated salary. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a scary 18 months. We've sort of drained our savings down to zero, but we're on the up now. So I'm now paying myself enough to sort of maintain, and hopefully not too long we can actually start to rebuild some of that savings. But yeah, this is not for the faint of heart. That's for sure.
Yeah. Maddie, real quick on that. I mean, not that you're going to sit across the table from clients and say, hey, I'm like barely scraping by. I'm not, all that stuff. But when you let them know that you started this business and, hey, I launched it with personal savings and this is why I'm doing it. Again, for me, the people that I'm working with are starting businesses themselves and taking risks. It's a lot easier when I can say, hey, I've had that risk. I've taken that risk. I've done this. Versus, hey, I was a W-2 at Merrill and, oh yeah, I have my own business. We have our own book. Like, no, you're really a W-2 employee. You don't have your own business and you don't understand what they're going through. So that sense of being real with them and explaining that, it has a lot of power. And I've seen that be successful, just being authentic about what it looks like. So no, I appreciate you sharing that as well. But yeah, it is definitely difficult.
Yeah. Can it be worthwhile to offer a one-off or hourly planning sessions for the folks that just need a quick fix?
I do have an hourly rate, and we'll do some like random project stuff. So it's not on the website because I don't advertise it, because I don't really want that work. If I'm being honest, I don't want to be there, but I have talked to people or met people or had someone reach out randomly from like NAPFA that's non-niche that I don't even really want as ongoing. But I could say, hey, I have the time. Again, the income is needed today. Like I want to have that revenue for the business. And if I have the time, I'll fit it in and I'll do it. Mm-hmm. So I have done it. I don't want to do that long term. And I have met with a handful of people that maybe are in my niche, but maybe aren't ready for an ongoing relationship. They just want to handle like 1 or 2 small things. Mm-hmm. And I've used that as a way to at least get in the door. And there's always more stuff. And that's where I tell them, hey, if you decide that you want to do something further, like I'll waive the upfront charge in the next 6 months or 9 months or a year, whatever it is, to help encourage them that if they do want to switch to be an ongoing client, that's a way to at least show them what you're doing. So I do offer it. I just don't advertise it.
Yeah. Awesome. Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, I didn't want to for 2 reasons. One, I've had sort of those bad experiences of just people coming back, and those have stuck with me in a depressing sort of way, where when they come back and they're excited because they did the things that they needed to do and they just didn't, and it was bad. So that was one, and that's probably a biased set of experiences, but nonetheless, those are my experiences with it. But 2 is I really wanted to focus, keeping my eye on where the puck was going. And that is building the kind of business that I knew how to build and know how to run, which is sort of more towards that traditional RIA model. Since joining XY, you start to meet all these other people who their entire model might be building a financial plan over the course of the year with a client and sending them on their merry way. That concept that I saw that for the first time at XYPN Live. Like, that's interesting, not for me. Works for them. And that was their puck. And so that just wasn't for me. I had, a small handful of clients to get started with that were more traditional and just stuck with it.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, that this is it's like there's no right way to do it. There's so many things that factor in your own personal savings goals, your own, location, who you're working with. There's so many different things to factor in that we're not hoping that everyone charges the same thing and it works for everyone. I think to the point originally in this conversation is that's what makes this all so awesome, is that you get to choose. So let's talk about the hard question real fast. Isaiah, what happens when someone pushes back on your fees?
I say the reason that I post my fees on my website is I don't negotiate, I don't lower fees, I don't adjust fees. And the reason that holds me accountable, and that's the standard, and I believe in what I charge, and if it's not the right fit, that's okay. And that's really hard as you're trying to grow and build your business, but I think having that conviction, you have to have it. If you think that your fees are too high and you're going to negotiate and lower them, then you are charging the wrong fee. Then change it to what is right, and then set it and go from there.
Yeah. Great advice. Daniel?
Yeah, that's part of why I just changed them around, because I kept negotiating with myself and trying to figure out how to make it work and get comfortable, and just could never do it. And so that's why I've set it up this way. No one's going to push me back on 50 bips. If they do, I'm happy to show them the door. And ask for that rest of the fixed fee. I developed something that I can explain and stand behind and be comfortable with, and so I'm good with that. I think the other part there that's really, really important is, really in that startup mode, the primary qualification of being a client is the old expression, being able to fog a mirror, and being able to pay my fee, right? And at this point, I do have a little bit more latitude to say, yeah, that's the fee, and actually stand behind it and not negotiate with them, let alone myself. But that's taken me time to get to.
Yeah, definitely developing confidence is part of this long-term play. Folks, if you can believe it, we're already nearly at the top of the hour. I told the members earlier that this call goes very fast. This was so full of incredible nuggets of wisdom, and I think is a really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the kind of conversations and the expectations you could have for the community members of XYPN, just in terms of openness of being able to share what they've done and how they've done it. We're trying to not make everyone recreate the wheel here. The more we can share, the more we can learn, is kind of our motto. So before I ask my last and final question to our wonderful members, I do want to make sure that all of our callers know that we are going to send out a survey about this webinar. We do review those results. As members, we review all of your results of surveys. We don't survey you for no reason. We really, really would love to know if this is the topic that you're interested in hearing more about, if this structure works, things like that. And then, of course, don't forget that next month we're going to be at a new time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And we're going to be talking about choosing between building a lifestyle firm and an enterprise firm. I look forward to seeing all of you guys next week, but don't leave yet, because we have some final pieces of sage advice from our members. Daniel, I'll let you start first, but if you had one piece of advice to give our callers tonight about fees, and maybe we've hit on it before, or something you just want to reinforce, what's the best tip you can give someone?
Just set it, know that you can change it later, and get on to stuff that matters more.
Good point. Like getting asses in the something. What was it, Isaiah?
Asses under management. Yeah.
I'd never heard that before tonight.
It's not my original quote, so I'm not gonna.
What one piece of sage advice would you give the callers about setting fees?
For me, it would be similar. Like, again, set fees. So if you know that you want to have lifestyle, now you're talking about enterprise or lifestyle next time as far as what practice you want to build. But if you're only going to have 50 clients and you need to make X amount of dollars, do some quick math and figure out what that is. But also, the biggest thing in the success of your firm is going to be around marketing. If you cannot market, you won't be around. It's great that you have the perfect fee structure, you have the perfect planning process and the best everything, but if no one knows you're there, you have to market your firm. And as hard as that is to hear, you have to market your firm. So that's my advice around fees, is you have to market yourself. So just don't spend too much time on fees when you need to plan out some of the other stuff.
Really good advice. Similar themes at the end of that.
Yep.
Callers, it is 8 o'clock in Bozeman, Montana. It's time for everyone to get to bed. I hope everyone has a safe and wonderful night. Isaiah and Daniel, you guys are just awesome. I could talk to you for hours about this. I think there is so much more to dig in. So callers, please give us some feedback in the surveys. Let us know what works, what doesn't. Isaiah, Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Couldn't appreciate it more. Everyone,
you're welcome.
have a wonderful night. See you next month at the new time. Have a good one.